Adam, welcome aboard the show. Thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I want to start with, I think, the number one mistake that my dad made. And you have a similar story to tell. Well, maybe not similar, but on the same vein. My dad, his whole life, built a boat, was in our backyard. And before he got to sail it around the world, this was his dream, the boat burns down. Totally real story. Instead of achieving his dream to go and do the sail around the world, he kind of puts it off, works his ass off, gets quite old, diabetes, cancer, never lives out that dream. Similar story from my wife's parents, but different items. You get old, you don't live the life you want. That kind of pissed me off. And I know you feel the same. Why do you deeply agree with that story?
Because tomorrow is never guaranteed. And I felt that way as a kid, and I don't think I knew why I felt that way. When you're being raised, that's all you know. But as you start to make your own decisions and you start to grow and you start to create your own bucket list and your own things to do before you die, you realize that the amount of time that you have as a kid and the amount of time you have when you're too old to do things subtracted from the total leaves you with a very small window to really get out and enjoy life. And that's now I'm starting to really realize how I want to live my life.
Was there a certain moment where you're like, fuck it, like we need to live today?
I feel like it was when I graduated from college and I started making my own decisions. Particularly, my parents raised me. They raised me very Polish, so I'm a great cleaner. I'm a great saver. Uh, and up until that point, when I was 22 or 23, I was also really great at talking about dreams and not living them.
Hmm.
And as my grandparents got sick and ultimately passed away, uh, I'll never forget my mom. And she said to me, "Look at all this stuff your grandfather has. It's like he wanted just to be buried with it." And I was like, how about wanting to live with it? How about wanting to enjoy it? You can't take it with. And it was around then that I realized I need to just live. That's how I feel. And that's where I want to leave it on the field. And if I have to go back to work to earn more because I blew it all having a good time living, I'm happy to go back to work.
What do you see the people around you, or your parents, or your grandparents, or anybody else? Do you see people living this lifestyle of, I might die tomorrow, I might live 80 years more, but I want to, or 40 years more, but I don't know what's going to happen? Or are people just, no, we need to save, work? What's your experiences been?
I think we're a very afraid society. And for and clearly I'm not going to get into politics, but for all the right reasons, whether it's the political environment or the financial environment or the actual environment, all of these things make us afraid. And as you look at different generations, we are trained to be afraid by those who came before us, who fought in wars or lost things. So the fear is very real, but then it becomes overwhelming, and it's how we live our lives is simply just shrouded in fear, trying to save ourselves with bank accounts or savings accounts, trying to save ourselves by not going on that trip or not getting on that airplane or not taking that chance or not getting outside our comfort zone ultimately. And there's so much fun and so much magic and so much that can be done outside your comfort zone. But no, the majority of people don't take that step.
What drove that fear for you and for your parents?
Well, my grandparents came from Poland and they lived through the Holocaust and were there when the Nazis invaded and got swept up in all of that. Actually, had to escape from a work camp as children and come meet some relatives here in Chicago, where I'm at. And so clearly, surviving that ordeal was something that they passed on to my parents, who then passed it on to me, which is very different because I while I've heard the stories and I've listened, sat on his lap and listened to those stories, I was born here, and this is very different. I was born in the suburbs of Chicago, and so my story isn't traumatic and it doesn't have enormous inflection points, but rather an evolution of what would my ancestors, what would they want me to be doing? How would they want me to be living? Did they do all that, go through all that with the hopes that a better life awaited and I could do great things and live every day? You said something that reminded me of my favorite quote as a kid. No joke. Dream as if you'll live forever, live as if you'll die today. Uh, could be aggressive at times, but you know what? I love it. And so I guess for all the things that they gave us, that's how I'm going to live.
Do you think your grandparents would be proud of what you're doing today?
They would be proud. They would be a little scared. I'm taking chances like maybe they would never have taken, but they would be proud. And I do have one grandmother, not from Poland. She's from
Mhm.
here. But she's in her late 80s. And every time I see her, she just couldn't be more proud. And that's nothing melts your heart more than when a grandparent is proud of you.
It's probably the only thing that can make me cry. Unfortunately, my grandparents are dead, but the last one was really a heart wrencher. The You said your mother, you scared the shit out of her. Why is that?
Well, because I think in a way, right, she did her best and she raised me and she worked her butt off for all those years. And for me to leave the nest and then suddenly start taking chances, it contradicts, the wear your helmet, look both ways, and is there a parent home at the party? Those are the things I remember as a child. But it's kind of like, Mom, I'm throwing my own party now. And so you
Yeah.
taught me how to throw a good party. But if I'm going to throw a party where I let a lot of people in and we stay up a little too late, well, you taught me how to survive that party, but I'm still going to throw that kind of party. So she's proud of me, but she's got that cautious optimism thing.
I appreciate the context. What specifically are you doing to piss her off? We all want to know, though.
Oh, I mean, I am staying up too late, and I do enjoy throwing a literal good party. My wife and I just turned 40, and so of course we threw two parties. Her birthday's a month before mine,
Nice.
and for her party, we rented out a venue and brought in a DJ from our wedding and had an ice luge that delivered you espresso martinis. And so while that was overwhelming for my mom, and I let my kids come and stay up till 10 o'clock so they could be part of the party. And then 2 weeks later, I flew 30 friends to Key West so that we could keep the party going for mine. Those are the type of things that makes a mom go, did I raise him right? But here I am on the other side of things, and I did it all responsibly. So she can be proud of me.
So, you kids, how many kids do you have?
I have two little girls.
Two little girls. Okay. Um, we, and I say myself as well, on the heels of the Holocaust. We also went through 9/11. Our kids didn't have either of those experiences, and they didn't get to meet the grandparents, at least not in my case. Are they living in a kind of a different conception because of that didn't go through those experiences? Do you feel that you need to give them a little bit of that fear or cautiousness, or are you absolutely glad that they didn't go through those experiences?
Well, they obviously are, right? And I enjoy, and I will not claim to be any type of expert, but I enjoy learning about generations
Mm.
and how the generations switch and how they were formed and how we ended up because of that, right? And it's obviously there are arguments about what are their key factors, but clearly technology, politics, geopolitics, and then the economy play into these things. Um, and so what I'm living is different than what my parents were living and their parents and so on and so forth. So now with children of my own, I'm not naive enough to think that they won't have their own evolutions in politics, technology, economy, weather, all these things that form us. So am I happy that they didn't live through some things? I guess sure. But I know they're going to, and they're going to have to, and it's going to have to define them. So I'm just cautious to figure out what it is, and I'm going to go through it with them too. But at the same time, I'm into history and I enjoy that. And I took my kids to New York City and I
Mm.
brought them to the 9/11 memorial and I explained to them what had happened because it wasn't that long ago. And so they understand that the world is a big place and things will happen and what it is that defines them. we're going to figure out together.
Yeah. On the one hand, I feel that my kids are living in a very blessed environment and they are just privileged based on the fact that they didn't go through hard experiences. But as you say, on the other hand, I'm grateful for that. But I do want them to get that perspective of, history repeats itself, and we need to learn from, if not our own mistakes, the mistakes of our nations that have come before. What is that? What does that kind of translate into your parenting philosophy? What are your hopes and dreams for your two daughters? What do you wish for them?
I'm I'm trying to teach them awareness.
Mm,
Uh, and hopefully that answers the question. I'm trying to teach them, well, first and foremost, situational awareness so they don't, ride their bike into the street. But then I'm also trying to teach them social awareness. What's going on around you? How can you pay attention to the fact that you're not the center of the universe? You never will be the center of the universe. And it's okay to exist in the universe and be ultimately very successful and happy. But the more aware you are of what's going on around you, the happier you're going to be because you can let the bad stuff go. You can be cautious. I want them to I want them to be able to think with their heads and choose with their hearts and make decisions with their guts. And combined, they will be successful because of that. Because then moving forward, there's emotional intelligence, and that's going to really require them to combine those factors to go out into the world and just take it on head on. So I want them to be strong enough to take it on. I'm raising my kids downtown in the city of Chicago because I want them to this is not, I wouldn't call it the mean streets. They are very
mm.
privileged, of course, where we live. But at the same time, there's stuff that goes on and they're seeing it firsthand. And so I want them to get some thick skin and realize that the world is out there and be ready for it.
So we usually don't talk about the businesses too much, but more about the kind of environmental problems and such. But this is an interesting one, and if I may use the word, a cool one. Um, First of all, why cars?
Cars, quite honestly, were not the reason.
Mm,
Not at all. Cars happen to be, and now we're going to get into some puns, they happen to be a good vehicle for living and enjoying and experiencing. But it just so happened to be what was in front of me at the time, and I was
mm,
prepared. Right? They say, when hard work and timing combined, that's luck. And so I was lucky enough to be there at the time when that was something I could take advantage of. And I've learned to embrace it, and I've become Chicago's car guy, and that's fantastic because cars do give you a feeling. We all
mm.
interact with them, whether we drive in them, we ride at them, we ride in them, we look at them, we work on them. So cars are a bigger part of our life than we think, but they weren't the reason I got into this.
So, I think back on, me and you growing up since we're similar ages, right? Grease Lightning, that was kind of in our rear view mirror. I'm in love with my car, Queen. There's a special connection with cars. When you, and we should probably, let the cat out of the sack here. You have a business that allows people to basically drive very high-end cars. And it's on a racetrack, keep me honest here.
Mhm.
What is the do you get to experience that connection, A, yourself, but B, through people coming and kind of sitting in this like luxury Italian car for the first time ever? What does their face look like the first time they do that, or when they come out of the laps? What's that experience feel like?
And that is why I do what I do, because it's
Mm,
so fulfilling to watch people's lives change. You have particular inflection points in life, and those create memory posts. And then the things around those memory posts are what you are left with as you grow older and think back on the memories that you made. And
mm,
so there's no way, first and foremost, that racing a Ferrari on a racetrack doesn't create a memory post. But the cool part about it is that so much of what we do and so many of the customers that we see are there with purpose because it was
mm,
given as a gift by someone who loves them and knows they've had been talking about Ferraris for their entire life or had a poster of a Corvette on the wall as a kid or was in the back seat of their dad's car and what is that? That's a Mustang GT. All this type of stuff. That's who we entertain. And so to see them see it in real life, then be allowed to touch it and drive it, and then get out and go tell their friends and family about it and share those memories. I love going to the racetrack and seeing that. I mean, whether we've had marriage proposals, we've had uh, we've had
So you
births,
you
we've
got to
had
tell us what's the most memorable moment, right? Marriage or whatever that has happened on the track or adjacent to the track that kind of you remember strongly?
This one is a little emotional because the marriage proposals are nice and it's my birthday is nice, but it's the bucket list. It's the this is what I'm going to do before I die moments. And those are the ones that really, I'm getting I can feel it because those are the ones that get emotional. And I've had plenty of people with cancer or older age, and they say this is what I've got to do. And then I hear from their family after they pass and say this was the
Oh,
second to last thing they did, and here's the story. And because of you, and I'm not taking credit or promoting the brand, but because of what we have here, I'm more at peace with it because I know how happy he or she was, before they left. We even had one couple who met at one of our experiences. They drove the cars together. They ended up getting married. Unfortunately, down the road, he got ill and he passed away.
oh no.
And so she came back to the racetrack with his ashes and at 140 miles an hour threw his ashes out the window of a Ferrari just because she
Oh wow.
wanted it to be back where it started. And I was like, holy cow, there's no way I could top that. So, and that's just in the last couple of years. And we've been doing this for almost 15 years. So the encyclopedia I have of things like that is phenomenal.
You said life changing. Did you, and I'm going on a little bit of a fishing expedition here, so I apologize, but have you had people come back and say to you, that moment, that experience, I decided to change my life choices?
Ooh, life choices? I don't know how much credit I
So
can take
go,
for life choice,
it's the thing we were talking about. It's between I'm gonna save until I die, and no, actually, I need to live for today. Is that something? Have you had that conversation with anybody?
I have. Actually, and that one goes all the way back to the beginning. I'll never forget this doctor showed up.
Yeah,
And sure, doctors are successful,
yeah.
but he had just been saving and he had kids who he needed to put through school. And he did our thing and he bought his first race car and he said, you know what? My daughters are still going to go to school. My marriage is going to remain intact, but I'm getting a race car because I'm not getting younger and I need to feel like this more. And I'll never forget him.
I appreciate that. So Adam, believe it or not, we're out of time. There's only one question that is scripted. It's the only question we ask all of our guests, and it's a difficult one because it's incredibly personal. If you had to go back to 20 something Adam, what would you advise him?
Just do it. Just do it. I was 20 something when I started this business, when I started changing lives, and when I decided to live every day. And so if just don't have any doubts, take chances and remember that all the magic happens outside your comfort zone, all of it.
Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show today. An incredibly important message. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.